Hi guys, I'm Darren, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can read out your receiver battery voltage using your transmitter. So this video comes from a viewer request, and it is how to read out the battery voltage which we can get from our telemetry from our receiver. So what I've got here, I've just got the SR10 Pro hooked up with a 2S lithium ion pack, and we're going to show you how you can read out properties from that receiver on demand, and also if the battery gets low. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that we have telemetry coming from the receiver. So we're going to go into our model menu, and we're going to go to the second page and click on telemetry. What we need to do now is discover the new sensors, and that will give us a load of data coming from this receiver. And once we've got everything, we can just turn that off and see what data we've got. So this is a stabilized receiver, so we've got loads of stuff relating to the actual gyro angle. We have RSSI, which is received signal strength indicator, which is basically how strong the signal is getting to the receiver. We have VFR, which is valid frame rate, and that is actually a better way of telling that the signal that this is getting is decent. Because you could actually have a low RSSI, but the VFR could still be pretty decent, and if that's the case, it's still safe to fly. So the VFR is a much better indication of that. We have our RX battery voltage, which in this case is coming from our XT30. So you can see that this little 2-cell is around 6.9 volts. And we have an ADC2 voltage, which is the analog in pin. Now, I believe on these receivers, they can actually take a full battery voltage up to a certain point. I would make sure you double check how much voltage this AIN2 pin can take on the specific receiver you're using. Early ones were only 3.3 volts, so to get the battery voltage you actually had to use resistors to get the voltage down to plug into that pin, just to make sure you didn't blow this up. So for this example, we're going to be using this RX BATT telemetry sensor. But you could potentially read out any values you want. Say this was a glider receiver with a vario in it. You could read out your altitude, for example. But anyway, let's get on to the actual readout part. Now, the first one is going to be really simple. We're just going to read it out on demand. So I'm going to use this momentary switch here just to read out the value. So let's go in special functions, and we're going to create a new special function. And we're going to go into play value, and the active condition, I'm going to hold the momentary switch towards me and then let go. So when we move that in that direction, it's going to play the value. So because I've added the switch now, we can set this to enabled so it won't be annoying while we're editing it. And now what we're going to do is just choose the value we want to hear. So let's click on the value, and what we're going to do is click again, and we're going to choose telemetry. And now what we can do is go through the telemetry sensors. Now it was down the bottom of the list, so maybe it will be down the bottom of this list too, and it is. So let's choose RX BATT and return out. So we also might want to skip this on startup. So now when we flick this switch, it should read out the battery voltage.
6.9 volts.
So let's just jump back into telemetry. We can see it's 6.9 on average volts.
6.9 volts.
So there we go. We're now reading out the battery voltage based on our switch. There was a part 2 to this, and that is, what if the battery voltage drops too low? Can you then read it out? And the answer is yes, we can do that pretty simply too. We're just going to create some logic. So let's pop into logical switches and create a new one. And we'll call this BATT LOW. And what we're going to do is use an A minus or A less than X switch. We're going to go in and choose our telemetry. We're going to choose our battery voltage. And now we can choose our safe threshold. So these cells can go down to 2.5 volts each. I mean, usually you don't really want to go below 2.8 volts each. So what we could do is set this to, say, 5.9 volts. we'll have the active condition as always on. And what we should really do is add a minimum duration. If this is getting its information from your flight pack and you're using an electric motor, for example, you can get a lot of sag when you're at full throttle. So what is quite useful is to have a minimum duration of maybe 10 seconds or 15 seconds. So if you're at full or if you're using throttle, the sag won't necessarily cause too many false triggers on this. So this will need to be below 5.9 volts for at least 15 seconds before it will trigger. So let's return back out of here. And maybe you want to read it from that switch as well. So what we can also do is add in another function. So let's call this BATT switch. And what we're going to do is set this to an OR. So the first value we'll do our switch. So we'll hold this down and press return to exit out. The second value, we're going to use our logical switch and we're going to set it to BATT low. So now we can exit out of this. If this battery low is triggered, it will trigger this one. And if this switch is triggered, it will trigger this one. So let's pop back into our special functions and we're going to edit our battery readout. And we're going to change the active condition from that switch to our logic switch for BATT switch. So if I pop back out, this
6.9 volts.
the switch will still trigger the readout, but also if the battery voltage drops, then we're also going to trigger. So let me just force this. So I'll go into logical switches and I'll edit this value. And what's the battery voltage?
6.9 volts.
So let me set this to
6.9 volts.
Okay, so that didn't work quite as expected. Sorry, I changed the wrong one.
6.9 volts.
I need
6.9 volts.
a delay before
6.9
active of
volts.
15 seconds.
6.9 volts. 6.9 volts. 6.9 volts.
Right, now we've stopped editing it, it should work properly. So you notice that it's not activated the logic switch yet. It will wait 15 seconds before activating. So yeah, I make mistakes too. So don't set minimum duration, set delay before active. So let's add a little bit more voltage. So in 15 seconds, this should activate and it will read out the battery voltage. Hopefully. There we go.
6.9 volts.
And it should only read it out the once. But because this will stay active for the duration of that being low, we could then also read out the battery voltage at certain intervals. So at the moment we have a repeater once, but if you wanted a
6.9
reminder
volts.
every 10
6.9
seconds,
volts. 6.9 volts. 6.9 volts.
okay, it was catching up because we were editing real time. But at the moment, now that it's caught up,
6.9
it is just playing it every 10 seconds. So you can see that this is working. So let's set this back to the proper voltage so it doesn't get too annoying.
6.9 volts.
So now it will only activate if the battery voltage is below 5.9 volts or we flick the switch. And of course, if we hold this switch in, it will play every 10 seconds as well. So there we go. That's how you can read out the battery voltage using a switch or using logic for meeting set conditions. As I mentioned, you can use this on anything. It's not just for the battery voltage. So there you go, guys. That's how to set up readouts of your telemetry data using ETHOS. I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up and also click the subscribe and bell icon. It's free and it will alert you to new videos that I produce, which you may also find useful. It will also help share this video and get it out to other people so they can learn how to do this too. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Thank you to all the Patreon supporters and people who leave super thanks too. It's all greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Follow models like you stole them. Have fun. I'll see you on the next one.